Hey everyone, I'm going to be talking to you about reading in the math class. Reading in the math class is a little bit different from other subjects. We teach our students reading strategies like annotating, which we call decoding, and that helps them to get through a word problem and know how to solve that word problem. There's lots of different strategies, but ones that I know that are being used within our school. The very first thing that we should always do, and that AVID recommends that you do, is pre-reading. This is done the first time around. You read the question one time completely just for comprehension. You don't have your kids decode, you don't have them highlight, nothing. This is just for them to start taking that information in, getting their brains registered, looking like sparking with those keywords, numbers, information. Um, Again, that is the first time through. They just read it. They don't do any decoding or annotating or anything. Now, cubes. Cubes has been used, I know, in a couple different classrooms in our school. It's decoding or marking up the word problem, and then students will apply strategies that math teachers provide for them to use when solving word problems. Cubes is just one of those strategies. Um, there's a there's a ton of different types of anchor charts you can make. You can buy them from Teachers Pay Teachers. I provided you with an example of one right here. But with cubes, the C stands for circle the numbers, the U stands for underline the questions, and the B stands for box keywords. E stands for eliminate or evaluate, and then S stands for solve and check. The solve and check is definitely very important. That's a good thing with cubes, where some of the other strategies you may not see the solve and check part of it. There's one that we are using this year just because with the test and whatnot being used on computers, you can't really have your kids go in and highlight and decode and circle and all of that. I mean, they're still able to do that, but this is something that they can put right down on their paper. Students will apply the strategies that math teachers provide for them. Again, this is just one of many strategies. It's not all of them. Over here, this is the math problem solving strategy. It says always read the problem carefully before you begin, then follow these steps. So you're looking at for what do you know? So in your know box, you'd have your kids write down the important information from the word problem. This could be the numbers. This could be, a very couple short words of what the question is actually asking you, that kind of thing. Then you add in the need to know. So what is your question asking you to do? This is where your students will say, okay, here's all my information for my word problem, but this is what the question is actually asking me, and that's where you would put that one in there. The plan and work box, obviously, it says take what you know and what you need to know and get to work. So this is where you would write your plan. Maybe if it's ratios, you would say write a ratio, and you put your work right in here after you kind of have a plan. And then obviously my solution, check and ask yourself if your answer is reasonable. So does it make sense? That's a big thing that I've noticed this year with our kids, is they're really struggling with trying, like, they just find an answer and they think it's the right answer. But when you talk to them about their answer, they realize that it makes no sense to what the question is actually asking. And also, does it answer the question? If it doesn't answer the question, then it tells you go back to step one, start over, looking at what you know, what you need to know, and then doing your plan and your work, and hopefully getting the right answer that is reasonable and makes sense. The last one is one that I use in my class. To me, it's very simple. The kids understand it. You don't have to cut anything out. You just put it directly into their notebook. And so sometimes decoding in the math class is easy as having your students mark up the text without any acronym. I know we like our acronyms, but sometimes it's good to teach them not acronyms because of tests being moved to doing them on the computer and whatnot. So the first one is just squiggle the question. Make the squiggle under the question. That way it stands out from the rest of the information in the problem. Also, it should hopefully draw their eyes to that question to make sure that's what they're actually answering. The X is not important information or numbers. I try not to use the X too much because it does have a tendency to, make your word problem a little bit messy. But sometimes you do need to X out those extra numbers that they give you, or um, extra information that just doesn't make sense and can be confusing at times. Obviously, you want to box important numbers. You can also box important words, but if you box too many words, then it gets very sloppy. And you want to keep it as simple and easy to read as possible. And then the last one is underline important info in words, or words, whichever you need. You can also underline important numbers as well. You can kind of intermix these 4 different strategies to meet your students' needs within the classroom. And then this last slide is just what I have written in my notebook for my students this year. It's very simple, it's very basic. Students, they understand it. It doesn't really take a whole lot of time. So, with reading in the classroom, make sure that you are engaging your students, make sure that they are interacting with that word problem or word story that they might be dealing with, or the problems that they might be solving with, open up. It's very, very good strategy to teach your kids. It's an AVID strategy, so you definitely need to make sure that you are using all of their strategies, engaging in the text, reading the text, annotating, or decoding the text. All right, thanks, guys.
Hey, so this is for reading ELA and social studies. So it's our AVID. It's our AVID focus is R. So critical reading. I've got some links in here for you, and it gives examples of all of these strategies. So I just wanted to make sure that you had access to those. I'm pretty sure I did it correctly, but please make sure that you email me if I did not give you access to anything. So this is the critical reading book for AVID, and it is chock full of all kinds of good information. So I popped that there just so you would have access to it. So for reading, they're pre-reading, during reading, and after reading for ELA and social studies. So you should set a purpose for reading. Why are the kids reading this? Just to read it? Of course not. You want them to pay attention to certain things, features of the text. So perhaps in language arts, you're looking specifically for figurative language, and maybe for social studies, you're looking for causes and effects. So make sure that you set the purpose for your students. During reading, they can be marking the text and annotating, and this will give you some ideas. But marking the text and annotating does not have to be coloring the entire page yellow with a highlighter. And it definitely does not mean restating the entire paragraph in your own words out to the side. It is a surefire way to make sure that the students do not ever annotate. So really, mostly what I do with annotating is I have the students use the main idea and just pull the main idea out of the paragraph and write it out to the side, any really important ideas. As far as marking the text, I may have them highlight like the main idea of the paragraph. So after they're done reading, you can do summarizing. Here are some examples for summarizing. You could do a one-pager. One-pagers are pretty fun. One-pagers and sketch notes are very similar, but I gave you directions for both of those. Summarizing, you can also do like a $2 summary where the kids get to use 20 words and 20 words only to summarize. So I just thought that was kind of neat and should be helpful. So marking the text is what I was really going to focus on, and there's different ways. So we have ELA fiction, nonfiction, and social studies. So fiction, you're going to number the paragraphs, and that's just a way to help you identify the specific sections. In the work that we do, we usually number the paragraphs, and then my students have chosen to mark the text features such as graphs or charts or pictures with letters instead of numbers. You might circle descriptive words and names of places. You might underline figurative language. You can change this up. This is what you want the students to look for. Okay. For nonfiction, you're going to do the number the paragraphs or the lines as well. And they say lines just because if you're doing a speech, perhaps it's a short speech and you just want to be able to identify a specific line, it might need to be more detailed. Circle key terms or cited authors or essential words or numbers. Underline authors' claims and other relevant information. Once again, this is completely, you can vary that. It can be whatever suits your purpose, the purpose for the students reading the text. For social studies, pretty much the same as fiction, nonfiction. For reading nonfiction, because social studies is nonfiction. And once again, this claims piece is pretty important. So that's really where you would want to pay attention to your purpose, the text, setting the purpose for reading the text. You'll go back here and pay attention to that. That might help you out a little bit. This has more information in the critical reading piece. And at the end, once again, there's a critical reading, AVID, the text, and then marking the text, how to and examples, and subject specific. So that is for the reading section for language arts and social studies.
Okay, so the R in Wicker stands for reading, as you heard, and you're going to find that the science portion is very similar to the ELA portion. All these strategies really could be used for any subject. And I'm going to focus on what we can do during pre-reading, during our reading, and after our reading in science. And of course, we are reading nonfiction passages. But during the pre-reading, you want to work with your students on building the background knowledge. Make sure they have some sort of background knowledge on the topic at hand so that they can comprehend those reading passages better. Some strategies that you can use during pre-reading really kind of just deal with vocab, because in science, vocab is tends to be the biggest hindrance for the students. So 3-column notes are great. The left column is for questions that the students have. Middle column is for notes. And then the right column is for vocab words and illustrations that relate to that word. You just have the kids create a chart with 3 columns on their paper, and you can guide them through that easily. There's also another strategy called total physical response, or TPR, and this is where you assign each group of students a different vocab word. I would say probably small groups, no more than 3. And then students will discuss in groups and define the meaning of the word that you gave them. And then together they have to create some sort of physical demonstration or act out that term. It can include an example. And then each group will present their act and explain the definition of their word. You can also use this vocab bookmark, and I've got lots of links in the science section, and so anybody can use these for any subject, as I said before. So during our reading, we want to make sure students are marking the text across all subjects, and this will help them certainly on their EOGs. So you start by having them number the paragraphs, and then while they're reading, you want them to circle any key terms, any cited authors, any other essential words. For science, you are looking at key concepts, maybe vocab, names of people, any theories that might be presented, properties, elements, formulas, any units of measure, science-related things you want them to focus on. That's what you want to have them circle. You also want them to underline the author's claims and any other relevant info to the topic at hand. Concerns, data, definitions, evidence. A lot of scientific articles will have evidence that's presented. So that way they are interacting with that text, and it's requiring them to do something other than read while they're learning. You can have students use a multitude of graphic organizers. These are all different strategies you can have students use, and as you can see, I've got them linked here. So this takes you to the file that is in our Google Drive, and it gives you an example of what that strategy is. Some of these are really great. So you could have them use these different strategies while they're reading to work on that. Oops, let me get back up here. All right. So I'm not going to go through every single one of these because you guys are capable of clicking on all of them. I can give you an example of a couple, like this descriptive organizer. I really love that news one that I just pulled up also. But you can see here, they're all graphic organizer type things. What I like about this is it gives you an example to kind of see what it should look like and how they should be writing in the graphic organizer that whole time. So feel free to use those however you see fit in your classroom. After reading in science or really any subject, we obviously want the reader to summarize their reading. And I've got a few different things that you can have them do to summarize their reading. This picture here is an example of a one-pager. I know my 7th grade people, you guys use one-pagers all the time. Shout out to y'all. But one-pager, I posted student directions and the handout for that, and the scorecard handout, how you could score it. But one-pagers are great to give your students to kind of synthesize all that information that they just learned in kind of a fun way. Plus, they look awesome when you hang them up in your room. You can also do something called a diamante poem. Sorry, I'm not good at pronouncing these kinds of things. But again, I posted here the link to the student handout and an example. So essentially what they're doing is using 2 descriptive words, 3 action words, 4 words, 2 words about the topic, and 2 words opposite to those in line 2. So it kind of tells you what to put in each line, and it helps them sum things up. And then they add things off here to the side as well, as you can see here. So the directions to that is posted on here as well on that student handout piece. And then there is another activity here called Get Curious and Ask Questions. And I've posted the student handout on here for you as well for this synthesizing activity for after they're done reading on a topic. So lots of really cool things for you guys to go through and resources for you to use. We really encourage you to use all of these resources in your classroom. We'd love to see them when we start doing some peer walkthroughs that are coming up soon. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. I'm Mrs. Keevitt, or just Lindsay, and I'm more than happy to help you out and give you ideas for using any of these things.